Here is an experiment done by David Creswell and colleagues. Let's read and then explain what. Let's read and then explain the experiment done by David Creswell and his colleagues. David Creswell and colleagues had participants complete a self-affirmation procedure before engaging in the stressful experience of public speaking and mental arithmetic in front of a hostile audience. Unlike those in a control condition, those in the self-affirmation condition did not show any changes from baseline in their levels of the stress hormone cortisol because chronic stress is linked to physical illness. This finding also suggests that affirming the self could have positive effects on health outcomes. David Creswell and his colleagues, they already had participants in an examination related to self-affirmation. So they did a procedures related to self-affirmation, and there are participants access to these procedures. After they finished the procedures, okay, they were not engaged in, they already had been access to this before what? Before they engaged in a stressful experience. Okay, so these participants already complete the self-affirmation procedures before they what? Before they access to stressful experience of what? Of public speaking and mental thinking, okay, in front of audience who are not friendly. So again, David Creswell and his colleagues had participants already, they complete the procedures related to self-affirmation. People who are access to experiment, and this experiment is related to self-affirmation. These participants or these people who completed the self-affirmation procedure examination finish that before they what? Before they face, okay, or before they are under experiment or under stress experience of public speaking and mental thinking in front of audience who are unfriendly. We will find what? That those people who are under control, those people who are under control, those people who are under control or those who are access to self-affirmation, they already have self-affirmation, didn't show any changes. They did not show any changes from the beginning, okay, of the level of the stress hormone, which is called cortisol. Why? Because they found that the chronic stress means the usual stress is linked to physical illness. If you are always in stress, that means you will feel physically your body, or you will feel that your body is ill. So you are physically not ill, but you are what? Psychological ill. And this usual or chronic means chronic that it is continuous. Continuous stress is linked to physical illness. Also, their findings or their suggestions affirm that self could have positive effects on health outcomes. If you have positive feelings, that means that your health will be good. That means that if you're in a positive way of thinking about yourself, about your self-esteem, that you have virtue, that you are good, that you are fair, that you are you have morale. All this will impose on your physical system. Okay, so here the conclusion of this examination, we want to show that the people who are self-affirmed will never feel that they are ill physically. They are not ill physically. But if they are not self-affirmed, they are not self-asserted, this will affect their physical health and they will feel ill, although they will not find anything related to anything physically in their body, no physiological illness. Due to contemporary researches related to self-affirmation theory, there are some involvement which has also large effects if they are already adjust or adapt to psychological process of self-integrity maintenance. Uh, Self-affirmation was used successfully to mitigate or to relieve the psychological threat associated with being the target of a negative stereotype in school. Also, previous research had demonstrated or showed that African Americans experience threat and its concomitant stress in situations in which now they are they or follow group members could be judged in light of a negative racial stereotype. This stress in turn can undermine performance. Also here there are some experiments, field experiments, experiments that done uh, on students classroom activity. Um, so let's read it with each other. A series of field experiments demonstrated or show or suggested or found that a self-affirmation administered for 5 minutes in the context of students' classroom activities. It's done for 15 minutes in the classroom or within the activities that done in the lecture. Improved African American students' end of term course grades and thus reduced the racial achievement gap by 40%. They found that they got self-affirmed at the end of the class, and this reduced their feeling of being racial and by 40%. Although the affirmed state stemming from a self-affirmation may appear relatively brief, the changes in attributes and information processing it prompts can become self-reinforcing or self-sustaining over time. Self-reinforcing, that means that it enhances self, give self-confidence to them, and at the same time self-sustain, maintain themselves and feel positive towards themselves over time. Finally, we can say that research and theorizing inspired by self-affirmation theory has led to theoretical advances in social psychology, helped in advances and give more details to social psychology, with wide-ranging implications for many instances of human functioning and frailty. Frailty. Also, self-affirmation theory research suggests that defensive resistance, self-serving illusions, intra intransigeance in social dispute, prejudice and stereotyping, stress, illness, and intellectual underperformance can be understood as arising in part from the threats to self-integrity and the motivation to protect it. Also, self-affirmation theory provides a framework for understanding the origins of these problems, which we mentioned in the last sentence, like illness, intellectual underperformance, stress, stereotyping, and so on, of these problems, and an optimistic perspective for the resolution. That means that all these problems of stereotype, like what have the American Africans have, can be resolved by social psychology. So, by this, we can finalize that self affirmation theory is one of the important theory related to social psychology and can improve the positivity of human beings and how they can deal with the society around them or within the context society they live with. And thank you so much.